goals and outcomes that we've been sharing for the last few months. The only difference now you know this is that we've boiled it down to a much more concise format.
I'd just like to thank everybody who worked on this. I think it's a great report, and thank you.
And I will say that our plan is used as one of the exemplars. School divisions are having difficulty trying to determine how to format their plan. Alberta Education more often than not uses the plan that we have here. So Chelsea's work is known Alberta-wide.
And we hear that, not just at this table, we hear that. So good job. Any comments? Questions?
Great job.
Yeah, good job, that's right. Okay, so we need to have a motion here. David?
I move that the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Catholic Board of Education approve the four-year education plan 2004-2028 as presented.
Any discussion? All in favor? Passed. Thank you again. Okay. 24-25 budget, Mr. McPherson.
Thank you. So there is the budget package that was left at each station, as well as it's attached to the board agenda. We are having a proposed motion from the trustees. Is be it resolved that the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Catholic Board of Education approve the 24-25 budget as presented with a deficit of $437,800. On page 8 of the package is a summary of the budget. With this, we can see our total revenue is expected to be $39.3 million, which is up over the previous year by $866,000, which represents an increase of 2.3%. Our expenditures are forecasted to be $39.8 million, which is an increase over the current year of $1.1 million, which represents a 2.9% increase year over year. That means our annual deficit would be $437,800. This budget has an increased staffing of 2.27 certificated FTE to bring our total complement of teaching staff to 151.7 FTE. We're quite excited to talk about our enrollment. It's up 88 FTE, which represents a continued growth of 3.2%. The major driver of the deficit, however, is with regards to our transportation contract, and we'll be talking specifically about that shortly. With regards to the board's assumptions, and these are on page 9 and 10.
Sorry, Mr.
Oh, sorry.
When do you prefer us to ask questions?
I can pause as they go
Okay,
along.
so I don't have any question now, but I just want to ask that question.
Oh, that's fair.
I do have one question. So we're saying that our current projection is 88 students, yet in other meetings we've had a number considerably higher.
Right.
What's occurred that has caused that number to diminish?
In the last 2 weeks, the schools have reported a lower enrollment for September 29th.
And the other one was a projection, right? The other numbers we heard was projection.
This is a projection as well, just so it's a more current projection than the draft that the board had previously received.
So what are the schools reporting as to people are changing their minds or what?
I don't have the details on why the schools are lowering their projections.
You don't have those details, you're saying?
I do not. I'm just going by what the schools are reporting.
Okay, so maybe is it appropriate to ask if you could update us in like June, our board meeting then?
Is that something that you would be able to?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some, I can speak just very quickly to that. There are several schools, I was at one on Friday where they had 3 families that come in, they're moving to Calgary and each has 2 kids. So that's 6 off the top. Some of it is placements and programming. Very honestly, sometimes it's the friend didn't get into this academy with us, now we're gonna stay at our current school. Those things happen as well. So,
Fair enough.
which actually, and when you have 9 schools where each one of them has 3 to 6 kids, all of a sudden we've got 30 students down. Not that that's happened across the board, but
I believe schools are being somewhat conservative with their estimates, and as we get through June and into August, those numbers are likely to change.
I would rather them be conservative than
Yes,
over optimistic.
exactly.
It avoids problems come October the 1st.
Correct.
Thank you.
The board's assumptions, which were approved in January, are outlined on pages 9 and 10, and they were all substantively met with the exception of number 6, which was a balanced budget with we achieved. With a deficit, we were not able to meet that assumption. Very specifically with enrollment, and this is on page 10, like we talked about, we have a projected enrollment increase of 88 FTE, which brings us to 2,785 full-time equivalent students. That does not include the 50 international students, and that's a slight decline from the current year. The current year forecast of 65. So 50 is a number that we feel we can easily achieve. With regards to the number of unique individuals that we're servicing, it's 2,979 individuals. So we are creeping up to that 3,000 student number, which is very positive. September 29th will be the enrollment count date, and we'll be able to assess the final impact to the weighted moving average on that date, bearing in mind that there will be 2 subsequent count dates for PUF students, December 2 and then end of February. So those 2 new count dates will impact our funding for the year. Yes, Stephen.
Mr. Person, I have a question related to the weighted moving average and students moving from kindergarten to grade 1. How were they viewed on that weighted moving average? Are they at 100%? Are they at 50? Where?
So the weighted moving average, when you look at an individual student, it looks at the total number of students in grades 1 to 9. So if the enrollment in grades 1 to 9 increases, the increased amount is funded at 50%. So it's not based on unique student, it's based on the collection of students from grades 1 to 9, the high school funding from grades 10 through 12, and then ECS funding for PUF and kindergarten.
Thank you.
Is ELP in here?
The early learning
Yeah.
program,
That's not part of these
No.
numbers. Yeah, okay, I didn't think so.
like the preschool
Yeah.
numbers wouldn't be included here.
Okay.
That's one of our out of school care.
Okay.
Sorry, not out of school care, preschool.
Yeah.
Mr. Liston?
Madam Chair, I'm not sure if this question is out of order, but being that we're on the weighted moving average topic, Greg, what is the consensus or the feeling of the position of ASBOA of the weighted moving average, this average? Do they have a position? What are you hearing when you go to those meetings?
I can't necessarily speak for ASBOA, but the general feeling across the board is the weighted moving average has created some complexities, and for boards that are seeing enrollment growth, it's a challenge because those new students aren't receiving the full funding within the first year. If you're one of the boards with a declining enrollment, that gives you a period of time to transition to that new enrollment level. For us as a growing board, we're up about 400 students over the last 4 or 5 years. It's creates some pressures for us.
There's no feeling that we should be lobbying upward education to abandon this kind of funding model and come up with something that's a little more equitable for everyone.
I think that would be something that the trustees should have a discussion with ASBA about and use the political clout of ASBA to discuss that with government. One thing to note with our funding, the funding that we received from the government through the funding profile was based on 2,726 FTE. So the additional 59 FTE has been built into this budget, and we'll see that funding materialize through the year. With regards to our net assets, and this is on page 11, the unrestricted reserve is expected to decrease to a year-end balance of $311,000. So that's the amount of money available to move us into 25-26. The restricted reserves are increasing by $160,000 to $1.16 million, which includes school-generated funds. And the capital reserve is expected to decrease by almost $500,000. And that's as a result of the expected use of the proceeds of the sale of the former St. Louis to help fund the board's commitment to the Holy Trinity Academy for the larger gym. So as we can see, the deficit of $437,000 can be fully funded through the use of the net assets, and still leaves us with a balance with the unrestricted reserve to account for any emergent needs or into the following year. I'm not sure.
Go ahead. Mr. McPherson?
Yes.
Through the chair, I'm going to address a question to you. So when we were doing our preliminary discussions on budgeting on May 2nd, got a document that said we're potentially going to look at an unrestricted reserve left with $117,000. And the number presented here is $311,000. What has transpired in the interim that's made this much better?
Well, that was a discussion in the in-camera committee of the whole. What has transpired is the enrollment has been adjusted as well as the deficit. So the deficit that we were originally discussing is not as high as what we're seeing now. And there's been some realignment of funds. So some of the restricted reserves have been moved back up into unrestricted to free up those dollars.
All right, thank you.
David?
The amount of $311,364. This is not a question. This is just an observation. Is, a year from now, if that amount stays static, we, along with a number of other school boards in Alberta, will be facing some critical decisions, because the government of Alberta, I think correctly, has been encouraging boards to spend down on their reserves. Our board historically has not had large reserves. Our board historically has used reserves to supplement budgets. going on for a long time. But we're getting to a place where starting next year, we need to be preparing ourselves that if we're looking at the same situation we're looking at now, we will not have enough money. So that's just a comment about the situation in Alberta and a comment about a situation in Medicine Hat. The government correctly states that they're funding Alberta education as a whole at record levels. That is true. It's also true that compared to other parts of the province, other parts of Canada, we're not at the highest level. And I think, I don't want to overstate it, but it's going to be a critical year for education in Alberta as we deal with these challenges.
Thank you, Chair. Greg, the 251,000 that I keep talking about from our commitment to the McCoy modernization, is that money sitting in the restricted reserve?
No, that's sitting as a deferred revenue, so it's sitting on the balance sheet side of the equation. So there's no claim against that as of yet. We have put an application into Alberta Education to free those dollars up to be able to be used for other purposes, presumably for Collegiate Academy.
And one other question, there was an article in the paper about, I think it was on Thursday last week, talking about budget cuts to school boards. And it listed our division as being cut. Are you able to shed any light on that at all?
I wasn't contacted for the article. The number that was quoted in that article represents the funding reduction in 23-24 as a result of enrollment alignment. And we've already built that in as part of the 23-24 first quarter update. The line from the funding profile that should have been used was an increase of about $260,000. Are there any other questions? Now we'll move on to revenue, and this is outlined on page 12. So our overall revenue, including the effects of enrollment, are increasing $867,000 or 2.3%, which brings our total revenue up to $39.3 million. Now, revenue is usually split out between the funding framework, which in this case we're seeing an increase of $738,000, and that's primarily driven through increased enrollment. So when we look at the Alberta Ed increases, and this is on page 12 of your package, we're seeing the base instructional funding increasing by $651,000. There are increases to the services and supports funding, so that's predominantly Hugh's budget, which is down by $118,000. The vast majority of that decline is coming from the pre-K PUF enrollment. We were back in 23-24, we were expecting 74 PUFs students. We actually had 59. So while it looks like a reduction, it's really just a reflection of what our actual enrollment is within the PUF program. There was some additional funding for FNMI, which offsets some of that decline. We are forecasting for a transportation fuel price subsidy of $96,000, and that's additional funding from the previous year. We did have a decline in our socioeconomic status funding of $76,000, and that's an interesting aspect because it's being driven by the recent census. So as a result of the reallocations, both within Medicine Hat as well as within the province as a whole, the allocation of those funds changed, and as a result, we are seeing a reduction within the socioeconomic status of $76,000. And unintended consequence of our enrollment increases has been our system administration budget has increased by $114,000. So that's been forecasted in as part of this budget. So we can see on page 13 how the funded framework provides the funding, with 58% of it coming through on total base instruction, services and supports 15%, schools funding of 16%, and then jurisdiction funding of 8%. So this gives a bit of a snapshot of where all those funding sources come from. The second component of revenue is the other revenue. So these are the non-funded framework sources. And this is on page 13. Our other revenue is expected to be up by $120,000, so it will be $8.1 million total. The government grants, so this will come from other education grants as well as other ministry grants, is up $1.7 million, which is down $377,000. And most of the decline is as a result of the grants winding up. The mental health grant is winding up. The police grant was wound up. So as a result, we're seeing declines. Instructional fees are expected to be up $288,000 to $1.6 million, and that would both be school fees and academy fees. Other sales and services are down $346,000 to $2.0 million, and we are forecasting donations to be up $425,000, and that's almost exclusively as a result of the fundraising for Holy Trinity Academy.
Chair, may I ask a question? Director, Mr. McPherson. So you changed slides. It says $425,000 for Holy Trinity Academy. Is that all external funds that would be donated by patrons?
Yes.
Excellent.
That will be used to offset the fundraising expenses, and we'll be talking in great detail towards the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
This graph takes our total revenue and splits it out. So what's interesting is you can clearly see 80% of our funding is coming from the funding framework. So that's where all the nitty-gritty are. The rest of this is broken down. We can see school generated funds represent 4% of our budget. Other government funding is 1%. Instructional fees are 2%. So you get a really good sense of where all the sources of funding are actually coming from. On the expenditure side of the budget, and this starts on page 15, we can see that our total expenditures are expected to be $39.8 million. So that's up $1.1 million, or 2.9%. We've gone through the budget, and we're looking for efficiencies everywhere. So this budget reflects that. The breakdown of the expenditures are here, and we'll be going through each one of these budget centers in fairly good detail. But what I do want to draw your attention to is on the this graph, we can see our instructional spending represents 75% of the budget. So out of all the monies going out, 75% of it directly impacts instruction. 7% is on plant operations and maintenance. 6% of the budget is for transportation. Board and system administration represents 4%. Our school consolidation project represents 1% within the current year. External services is 2%, so those would be the before and after school programs and preschool. Our capital expense, so the amortization represents 5%. When we look at the breakdown by category, the blue, red, green, and the purple section represent staff salaries and benefits, and 70% of our spending is going straight through to personnel or staffing costs. As you would expect, we're a human-centric organization, so our majority of our costs should be there. Services, contracts, and supplies are 22%. School generative funds are showing 3%, amortization 5%, and there's really just trace amounts after that. Within the instruction budget, so that's 70% we talked about. That represents $29.7 million, which is up $416 million from the previous year. 151.7 FTE of teachers are included, and that's 2.27 FTE increase for the current year. The instructional staff pool, which is where we charge teachers as well as other school-based staff, that is $18.6 million, and that's up $203,000 from the current year. There is no ERIP built into this budget or the early retirement incentive plan. Our average teacher's salary hasn't materially changed from the current year. However, our overall benefit costs increased by quite a bit, by $110,000. So that's a significant increase year over year, and that's a function of the ASC EVP benefit plan being more expensive as we see dental as well as extended healthcare coverage climb.
I'm sorry, can you go back about 3 slides? It was one, I thought you said $416 million increase.
Probably said 416, but then 416,000.
Okay,
let's delete that million.
Yeah, I'm going, sorry, well beyond our budget. Okay, thank you.
That would be a 0.416.
I was having a tremor.
Sorry. Now we're starting to talk provincial budgets here.
Exactly.
Religious education is the next budget center, and we're spending $146,000 there for the upcoming year. There's been no significant change to that budget. One thing to keep in mind, within this budget center, the salaries are charged to instructional staff, and so that would be both for the coordinator of religious education as well as the child. The instructional pool, which represents our common or shared construction expenses, and this is on page 19, are charged to this budget center as opposed to splitting it to each school. There's an overall increase to this budget center of $105,000. There's three major drivers here. First is with the school resource officer. The actual cost of the SRO has gone up a bit, but we're also adding 0.25 FTE to the division, which is shared with the police service. So we're actually going to see more school resource officer involvement within schools, which is a positive aspect. We also have a $40,000 grant called the Bridge to Certification Program, which will come out of this budget center. There's a employee who has a journeyman status who is looking to become a teacher. There is a grant in order to help that individual pursue their studies to become a certified teacher. So this is the expense for 24-25 related to that individual pursuing their certification.
Somebody asked me the other day how do they do that? Is it 2 years of schooling, or is it a whole degree program, and I didn't know the answer.
It's that individual's been accepted into a program through the University of Alberta.
Right.
He's already begun taking courses now. He's taking several courses online, beginning actually a few weeks ago until the end of June, and then he does some summer coursework. Most of his time next year will be spent at the University of Alberta for one full calendar year.
Okay.
And then he can come back and work under a letter of authority for 3 years as he finishes the rest of his Bachelor of Education degree. So the grant is,
I didn't know how to answer it.
yeah, it's a really interesting program. It's an excellent opportunity.
What's his trade?
He's a chef.
But they have to have a red seal first, right, in order to even
Yes.
qualify for this. Yeah.
So, Chair, I'm not sure, maybe it's to Mr. Gale. So do we have a verbal or a contractual commitment that this person, when they're done and they've got their red seal, that they're going to come and teach in our division?
So the commitment was that during that 3-year period that we would offer them some teaching time, some employment, which we felt we could offer them. The discussion we had with that individual is we couldn't guarantee a 1.0, but that there would be opportunity for them to work in the division during that 3-year period. But at the end of the program, there's not an obligation for us to offer them employment. Very often, where these programs are being offered, they're in jurisdictions where they're looking for a new shop teacher or something like that, and they make those arrangements independently, but we do not.
So but is there a commitment on their side to guarantee that beyond taking the money we're providing so they can get their schooling, that they're gonna come back and reimburse us in terms of working in our division?
No.
If I may elaborate a bit though, the government provides us with the money and then we flow it through.
Yeah,
So
there's no-
it's essentially a flow through activity.
But even so, there's no commitment on either party. Okay, thank you.
Just during the life and agreement that we offer teaching time.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Greg. I just wanted, if I didn't ask it, then it's gone.
Oh, that's fair. And there's additional increase of $11,000 based on the school's plan for the band program. So we've included that based on their plans. Within the budget center called division programs, and this is on page 18, this is essentially the deputy superintendent budget. And it includes the health and wellness as well as the leadership program. It previously included the curriculum implementation. So we've had a decrease within the budget year over year by $201,000, but the decline is really as a result of the realignment with the hiring of the director of curriculum and their own budget center being set up. Which leads us to the curriculum budget, which is the director of curriculum. And that budget is set at $164,000. As it's currently comprised of two major areas. The first is the curriculum implementation funding that we will have for 24-25 of $128,000. as well as there's a new grant called the Digital Assessment Implementation. And that's a grant of $32,000 that the Director of Curriculum will be managing. So those are two excellent sources of funding to help our division. Within international education, also on page 19, we have total expenditures of $871,000, which is a decrease from the 23-24 budget of $166,000. The major driver for that decline is us projecting 50 FTE of international students as opposed to 65, which we projected in 23-24. As a result of that decline, the allocations for certified staff to Monsignor McCoy has declined from 2.0 FTE to 1.0 to better reflect the activities that are going on at the school. There is also the residual SCSL, or I guess the Holy Trinity Academy, and the religious ed allocation. So that's $110,000 to be split between those two programs. Those programs are in a deficit right now in 23-24. So about $70,000 deficit has to be repaid from that 110, which will leave about $40,000 on August 31st, 2025.
Can I just make a comment on the chart?
Yeah.
The main reason for the decrease in anticipated enrollment is due to the federal government a few months ago with an announcement that they were going to reduce the number of international students allotment to Canada. Unfortunately, the federal government doesn't have a clear concept of the impact of that decision. International students, in terms of the revenue that they generate to the Canadian economy, is larger than software exports. So it's a multi-billion-dollar budget for them. And even back in the days when I was still involved, they didn't really understand the impact of international education in the country. Talking to my colleagues who are currently working in international education, as soon as the announcement came out, they saw an immediate decrease in enrollments because agents who are working in other countries have to promote countries that get students interested. And if there's a risk that they won't be accepted, then they're not going to put their time to promoting that country because by the time you get rejected for a visa, it's too late potentially to apply for another country. So overall, both in schools and in universities, registrations have declined significantly, so much so that some universities are concerned that we'll be shutting down full units within the university. So it's going to have a multi-billion-dollar impact, almost instantaneously. And those rules are still, even the announcement, because they haven't really changed a lot, but just the announcement has really scared out a lot of potential international students. And as much as school systems enjoy the benefit of having international students, most international students pay at least twice the amount for tuition of a Canadian born student to universities and college. And so if you eliminate those students, it's a significant impact to every college and university. But that's why we decided this round to be conservative in our number. And we have more students that end up enrolling. Great. But we didn't want to claw back money after the fact.
We should maybe send a letter to Glenn Watts saying that something.
I know that there are provincial and Canada-wide organizations that are actively engaged in this work right now.
I mean, not a nasty letter, but a letter that this is a concern for our school district, and you are our MP. That's. Do that. Go ahead.
Okay, Chair, if I can direct this again to Mr. McPherson. If you can just refresh my memory, because I seem to have forgotten, the $70,000 deficit that we're carrying forward for international education, what was the driver behind that?
The 65 FTE that we were expecting in 23-24 of international student enrollment did not materialize.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So as a result, we, those funds that were available for religious ed, we spent them as part of the budget, but unfortunately those funds didn't come in, so that left those
Right.
programs in the hole.
Okay, thank you.
The next budget center is dealing with learning services, and that includes Q's learning service budgets, the PUF budget, as well as early ed and preschool. So this budget is set at $5.532 million, which is $306,000 lower than the current year. So when we look at our pre-K PUF enrollment, the projection for 23-24 was 74, and the actual was 59. When we look at what we were forecasting for 23-25, we've set that to be 57 based on what we're aware of. So that means that there year over year, there's a $311,000 lower funding to go from 74 projected students to what we're projecting now at 57. There was also some other grants that were coming to an end, which contribute to the overall decline within learning services. The first being the Calgary Police Foundation grant is ending, and so that's an $80,000 decline year over year. And the mental health grant is ending, which is a $95,000 year over year reduction. Both of those we were anticipating, so there's nothing shocking or lying about it. It's just when we signed the grant, it was to March 31st, 2025. As a result, there is 1.4 FTE certified lower within the budget, and there are 4.0 FTE fewer non-certificated staff included in this budget. The preschool budget itself is looking at $449,000, which is a decrease of $21,000, and that's a function of schools anticipating there being fewer students enrolling within the preschool programs. One of the things the trustees are aware of and probably should be reminded is the demographics for the coming years are showing lower birth rates, and we're starting to see the result of those lower birth rates coming in. You know, you're expecting 74 students come in and 59 materialize, and that's a function of just there being fewer students available. So we're seeing that within PUF. We're now seeing it within preschool, and we're likely to continue seeing this for the next several years. So it's not a function of activities within the school or parents not being satisfied. It's just there's a lower birth rate, and the demographics are catching up to us now. Yeah, that's an interesting aspect. Like, outside of preschool and PUF, our capture rate has increased. We were about 22.5% of the market 5-6 years ago. The last calculation shows us at about 25%. So even though there's the demographic decline, our capture of that pie is getting larger, which is a positive. The Communities Coming Together budget has a small increase of $9,000 to the grant, so nothing really material there. The nutrition program had no no material changes, and that's on page 22. Outreach, so the St. Joseph's School, and this is on page 22. The grant of $100,000 was not available within the funding profile for us this year based on the weighted moving average and the low number of students that it's showing. We have maintained, however, a 1.0 FTE to be essentially funded with St. Joseph's / Monsignor McCoy, as well as the 0.07 secretary. The trade-off was, however, there's no allocation to the school, but all the students who are enrolled within St. Joseph's are part of Monsignor McCoy as well, and they're receiving the full student allocation for those students. So unfortunately, we didn't get the grant, but we value the program and are retaining the instructional resource for that. Which leads us to the school-based budgets. We're seeing an increase within the school-based budget of $174,000. $26,000 of that is a result of the per student allocation, and that's a function of there being more students. We are also showing the learning loss allocation of $33,000, so we built that into the budget right now. Last year we didn't build that in until October when the funds were available. We know the funds are coming, so we're building it in now. The outreach allocation has been eliminated, so that's the $15,000. Schools are reporting their school fees to be up by about $21,000, and academy fees are up by $99,000. So that's because of the higher fee rate as well as the more number of students participating in the academy programs. School generated funds. So we're seeing an increase in revenue of $250,000, so 1.278 million. There's projected spending of 1.3 million, which is an increase of $315,000. So spending exceeds revenue, so there's a small deficit of $41,000 within the school generated funds, and that can be fully funded through the restricted reserve, and that leaves about $600,000 at the end of the year within that reserve account. Before and after school programs, and this is on page 23, included here is also the Division PD daycare child program. So we're expecting our before and after school program to be generating $208,000, which is a decrease of $43,000 from the current year. Our spending is forecasted to be $223,000, which is also a decrease of $28,000. So across the board, schools are projecting a deficit of $15,000 within the before and after school program, which would be absorbed through the school generated funds at year end. On page 24 is our technology budget. It is just sitting over $1 million, which is an increase of $129,000 from the current year. The major changes for this is with the Chromebook leasing. For this second batch of Chromebooks, that's an increased cost of $53,000. Our software licensing has increased quite a bit by $88,000. But that is offset because of the cybersecurity project of $31,000 savings. So a lot of the cybersecurity project implementation last year was buying additional software. So those software costs are now part of the software licensing. So that's the offset. With all the improvements we made to our technology system, we're now starting to see our hardware maintenance costs go down. So we're taking another $10,000 off of the hardware maintenance budget. We are, however, doing some replacements within the upcoming year. The uninterrupted power supply for our servers, so in the event the power goes out, our servers can remain running for a short period of time until a safe shutdown can be performed, as well as the backup site equipment replacement and school presentation laptop replacements. Those 3 projects are going to cost $25,000 and have been built into the technology budget. Board system administration is on page 24, and our administration budget is sitting at $1.687 million, which is an increase of $102,000. Staffing costs have gone up by about $71,000. Now, the drivers for this are the benefit costs, the placement of some new staff on the grid, as well as setting money aside for salary increases depending on what transpires through the collective negotiations. Travel has increased by $9,000 as we come out of COVID. There are more meetings that people are attending, so we're starting to see slightly higher costs as a result of that. The dues and fees have increased by about $13,000, and that's just a function of the cost going up as well as the CCSSA dues and fees being charged now. And then communication supplies we have a budget of $2,000 to assist our communications officer perform the wonderful work that she does for us. Transportation is on page 25. We are seeing an increased revenue of $96,000, and that's a function of enrollment as well as the fuel price subsidy grant that we're expecting. Now, we did go through a process of a request for a proposal to ensure that we're getting the best market rate that we can for transportation. As a result, we're seeing an increased cost of $331,000 for the upcoming year. So that's unfortunate that it was that high, but that is what the market is bearing. We are proceeding with the camera installation. That will be set at $28,000, which is actually a savings of $7,000 from what we were originally anticipating. So that's a small positive. Our plant operations and maintenance. This is a larger budget of just over $3 million. We're seeing a small increase in this budget of about $63,000. So staffing costs are increasing by about $43,000. We're seeing inspection costs starting to climb. So we increased that budget by $7,000, and that's both for the elevators, the fire alarm systems, and fire extinguishers. Our building repairs, the costs related to maintaining our buildings are going up. Motors are becoming much more expensive if you can even find them. So we are expecting our building repair costs to go up by about $30,000. With the new vehicles, we expect to see some significant savings there. So we're reducing the vehicle maintenance budget by $5,000. We are also reducing our equipment purchase budget by $5,000 and the supply budget by $4,000. A piece of really good news, our insurance costs are starting to come down. So we expect to see a $20,000 savings for the current year. And that's a result of the work that we do as part of the USIC Insurance Consortium. And we're working with Marsh in order to get excellent rates on insurance. So we're quite excited by that, which is a little bit offset with our utility increase. We are expecting to see another increase on utilities, and we've built in a $17,000 increase on that budget. But I cannot stress enough the work that the board approved with the Johnson Controls project to replace the lighting as well as the HVAC systems within the schools have resulted in significant savings overall. If it wasn't for that, our costs would be pushing $100,000 extra each year. So that's based on that forethought from the board. We're very fortunate.
And they keep track of that, right, to make sure that.
Yes, so last year was the last year they were going to do it.
Okay.
We're satisfied with the savings that they promised have materialized. So we won't get ongoing reports because there was a small cost associated with that. But given we've had 2 or 3 years of reports showing consistently high savings.
Good, thank you.
Holy Trinity Academy. So within this budget account, we have fundraising expenses projected for 24-25 of $253,000. So that's both contract and salary. In 23-24, we had fundraising expenses of $188,000, which means we need to have fundraising within 24-25 of $441,000. So we built that in as part of the budget that those funds would be collected. In 24-25, the funding commitment for the 80% of the larger gym at Holy Trinity Academy would be about $1.986 million. We know we have the St. Louis funds that we've applied to administer to use, which we fully anticipate will come in, which means our fundraising for the commitment would be $1.482 million. So when we combine the $441,000 with the $1.482 million, that means the total fundraising required within the year is $1.942 million. So just south of $2 million. So we've included this as part of the budget. The funding commitment would be a capital item, so it doesn't show up within the income statement. But the fundraising, because that's a pure expense, does show up within the income statement. So we've included that as both an expense as well as a offsetting revenue. But this gives the trustees a baseline of what we need our fundraiser to achieve by August 31st of 2025. There is a bit of wiggle room. We've had discussions with the province about the timing of those payments, and they're willing to work with us. But if we go by a strict reading of what we've committed to, this is the target. But like I said, there is some wiggle. So that brings me to the end of the formal presentation. You've been providing questions throughout, but are there any remaining questions before we talk about the motion?
David?
Several. What page was the school generated funds on?
Page 23.
So are you am I understanding this correctly, that the schools are saying they're gonna take in next year $1,278,426,
Yes,
and then they're going to spend $1,319,790?
correct. Which isn't unreasonable. There's about $650-ish thousand sitting in the accumulated reserve for school generator funds. So there's been a bit of a discussion with schools about trying to use those funds up.
One of the requests I have is if you could please, for the June Board of Trustees meeting, in the agenda, develop a table that shows us what each school has or is projected to have at the end of June, at the end of this current school year, in both school-generated funds and school reserve. If I can see that, please.
Sure. For which year? For 23, 24?
This current school year that's ending.
Okay.
Trustees will remember, I appreciate what you said. Sometimes we lose track of what's been in committee of the whole and what hasn't, so I withdraw that. I do have concerns, which I've expressed previously, about the increase of 3 teachers at McCoy. I see that their student projection has gone up 60.
Sorry.
So, to me, that would be 2 teachers, two something. And then I saw that they were losing a teacher for international education. And then I'm also aware of, that once students get into grade 11 and 12, they're not taking as many courses. They have gaps in their schedules. And so I'm curious as to the rationale for an increase of 3 teachers at McCoy. And I know you're going to answer my question, Mr. Gill. I have a request for you, is if in the board meeting in June, if you could please present us with a table that shows us the class sizes at each school. I'd be curious to know, are there any elementary schools that are looking at a class size of 28, 29, 30 in a class? And especially if there's any split grades that are up to 27, 28, 29. And I'm laying my cards on the table because board trustees have seen me do this in the past. Frankly, I'd add staff there before I add staff for 3 teachers for 60 kids at McCoy.
Sure. So in response, David, the Montana McCoy number that you're seeing there, the total staff in 2023, 2024 was projected last year. Where they actually landed this year was something in the neighborhood of 29.3 in all totality. What we're projecting next year for them would be in a totality of about 30. Actually, I think today I looked, it was 30.08 is their total FTE they'll be receiving. So when you look at that Montana McCoy number, where it says total staff 2023, 2024, it's the second last column. That was the initial budgeted number that had gone up as enrollment had gone up this year.
So why wasn't that here?
I don't know. That was the whole number. So
Because I think it would be important for us to be looking at the up-to-date information, correct?
What we're trying to do is show approved budget to approved budget. That's what we have to report to ministry on. So I completely hear what you're saying, that the quarterly comparisons change, but for what we have to report, it's budget to budget.
Because because I'm just hearing this information now, I may be about to say something that's incorrect. So please correct me. So what I'm hearing from you now is that, and I may be comparing apples to oranges, I recognize, What I'm hearing now is that when I look at the FTE actuals for McCoy, 23-24 of 551, what I'm hearing is that Mr. Leahy, their actual staff wasn't 25.08, it was 29. So that part of me says, from when I used to sit over there, they're overstaffed.
So that number, the 29, includes the additional funding we provided for international ed. So their enrollment that you're seeing there does not include international education. So their enrollment, I think, hard number inside their building this year is just over 600. And then also staff them for the additional 10 FTE for St. Joseph's.
Like if I take just over 600 and I divide by 27, typical class size of 27, I get 22.22.
Right, so then included in there we have LST time, your administrative time, counseling time, and a host of other of those things.
So one, I think next year as a board, when we talk about budget preparation, we should have, and I understand what I hear you saying, Mr. McPherson, comparing, you know, the budget to the, whatever you said, Mr. McPherson. But I think it's important for us to also hear what the staffing is happened during the year, because I've heard from time to time, you know, which I don't disagree with, that we have given a senior administration the latitude to make budget changes during the year. Sometimes they come here, but sometimes they don't, which I'm okay with because I know situations can develop. But it helps to give us a better picture. So I'm expressing my concern about that. You know, part of me would like to know how many classes McCoy is offering versus, and then having that compared to teacher loads and so on. So just to repeat, I'd like to see, basically what I'm saying is let's see all the class sizes next month, so that if you can advise us of where the hot spots are in, and perhaps trustees may want to make some changes. I see that there was a minor thing, some fairly significant increases in trustee travel. What was the, I don't know what page that was.
Page 51, I think.
Like it was doubled, so an increase of $13,000. And I'll state my bias. I've one of the first places I always looked at when I sat over there to cut budgets was travel. You know, so I'm curious as to why, you know, it went in some cases from 2 to 4, from one instance from 4 to 7.
So when I was going through the budget process, I pulled the actuals as of whatever date it was, middle of April. And the travel expenses were higher than the budget. So we extrapolated it based on if that was the activity as of now, it's likely to continue on into the future. Okay.
And I may have some comments about that later. School research. Thank you. That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? Mr. Kinch?
Thank you, Chair. So when we go and look at this and we go last year's budget, so at this time we projected a deficit of almost $166,000. We exceeded that by a considerable amount. I think we got over, am I correct in saying over 700,000?
We are about just over 700,000.
Okay, thank you. And so we're projecting this year a deficit of 438,000. With our unrestricted reserve coming in now, being forecast to be $331,000. So that doesn't give us a great deal of flexibility to react quickly to situations that could occur throughout the school year. I'm not particularly fond of deficit budgeting, which I think as an individual, as myself, I try and make sure I live within my income. I'm concerned that we're going on 2 big deficit years here, which will leave us, as has been discussed, in a tenuous position following years. I respect the fact that you said earlier you've tried to cut some of these to the bone and rearrange and looked at it. I don't know where we can go, where we can suggest more cuts, but I think as a board, all the trustees, we need to be concerned about deficit budgeting. Now, 100,000 is not a major amount, but 700,000 puts us in difficult situation, I think. I don't know, I can't suggest something. I'm just more or less making a comment and reflecting on our recent past and our projected future. And I'm concerned, and like Trustee Leahy, I might be interested in somehow paring down some of the travel expenses or other expenses that we incur that are not necessarily required. That's all I have to say on that right now.
And I think those are very valid points. I really need to come in with a balanced budget. One thing to keep it in mind, the funding that was provided to us did not provide for any inflationary aspects. The increased transportation revenue doesn't reflect the current reality of what it costs to transport students. So those are just two aspects. With regard to the reserve, there are funds available, the 311,000 to get us through to the following year. So if there are emergent points, we can deal with that using those funds.
Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Catholic Board of Education approve the 2024-25 budget with a deficit of $438,800 as presented.
437,
Thank you.
yes,
Then I have an amendment.
okay.
That the Board of Trustees direct senior administration to find $125,000 to increase the religious education budget. This is to be done without increasing the projected budget deficit. Administration is further directed to recommend if the additional funds should be used to increase the chaplaincy for students and or to hire a person to help with the religious education preparation of staff.
And you want that added to this current
Motion.
Could we have 2 separate motions?
Yes,
One to approve the budget, and then another to,
Amend the budget.
well,
or you want that as a motion?
I wanted that as an amendment to the motion that was written in the paper on the
Yeah.
sheet.
or
I think that'll be second.
And then, may I speak to the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
I've been, after the visit of the bishop here, We spend approximately $300,000 of our budget on religious education on a $39 million budget. And we know, I just feel it needs to be more, it should be more. You know, Heather commented when we met with the bishop, one of my sayings is, you know, you show me your mission statement when you show me your budget. I didn't come up with a Father, I believe his name is Father Penna. He's in Saskatchewan now. He used to be a new theologian. That's the first time I heard that. We also know that many of our staff are coming to us unchurched. Many of our staff perhaps don't understand our religion as much as we should. I remember I was struck with it, and I continue to think about it. Mr. Kinch once talked about our journey on faith as being a ladder. Sometimes you're down here, sometimes you can go up and down on it. I think we need to take more steps to take our people from here and move them up. I think there's a great amount of work that could be done. And first, I want to say this is not a slam on our education religious director. It's not. As you know, I'm a big fan of hers.
Absolutely.
And I know I complimented her earlier this year on what she's able to do as a single person in that job. This is to help her and what our mission is. I was struck in church this weekend. There was a presentation by a missionary who works at the University of Calgary, and he had some statistics about the amount of young people who are going to church. I just feel I don't want to sound corny. I'm called to ask you to increase the amount of money we put towards religious education. That's why I'm making a motion.
Okay. Thank you. You have
I did, Chair, and my question was going to be directed to David, asking for context. But I will comment on it in that I think it's a very noble suggestion to do that. But I would suggest we're at the wrong time in our financial state. I just look at it and go, I would personally like to see more money going directly to support students in the classroom with aides or teachers. We are a Catholic district. The only reason we exist is because of religious education, and that should be, yes, a main priority. But at this point in our financial present, I don't know how we can do it. I just don't see where we can make those cuts. I mean, if you have suggestions on where they can come from, and we could do it right now, then I would say, let's pare it out and let's figure it out. But to simply be ambiguous and say, let's leave it on administration to make this happen, it's kind of difficult when we want to try and pass the budget this evening. Yes, go ahead. No, that's fine, Chair.
I was going to make those same comments, Bernie. We say that we shouldn't put more money into religious ed. Is not a good position for a trustee in the Catholic division. But I agree that saying to administration, find $125,000 is not being fair to them. They have worked on this budget and pared down. We've been paring down and finding efficiencies in this budget in 14 years that I've been a trustee to bring us to where we are today. And to say we'll pass this budget with the caveat that we saddle administration to find $125,000, I don't think is a fair request of them, and I can't support that amendment.
Okay, any other comments? All right, so we will vote on, sorry,
To answer Mr. Kinch, I could find $125,000 in this budget. I don't wanna do it in this setting because it involves jobs. But I could find it. I'm not being critical of administration when I say that. But, and I'm not saying it's fat, it's not fat. But if I'm gonna make the choice between, let's say, a staff member who's working with kids on X, let's say physical literacy, versus a staff member who's gonna work with kids and teachers and whatever on religious ed, done. Snap. Do I say to people in this office, you're not traveling? Snap, done. Do I say, you know, that there's, at one time there was money and there has been money in this in our school budget, X amount of somebody's job in this office is to help support the foundation in the golf tournament. It's not happening anymore. Snap, that's gone. So there, I could find the money. Administration could find the money. Part of it's their job. It's direction from the school district. You go in and do it. I'm not saying it's fat. It's not fat. It's just making a moral judgment about what's more important. I remember in this district, as the superintendent, we used to have a half-time religious education coordinator. When I sat in that office, I said, no, we need to make it a full-time. Got it approved, then the board changed their mind, and finally I convinced them to make it a full-time job. They found the money. So $125,000 out of a $39,000 budget,
$1
$1 million, thank you, can be done. Is it gonna be easy? No, it's not gonna be easy. But if it can be, it's just you referenced the home budget. You know, what are we gonna go for a vacation this year? No, we gotta replace the furnace. You know what I'm saying? There's decisions that could be made. And I think this is a critical juncture for the board to start saying, in the face of these constraints and these pressures, we are still going to fall on the side of religious ed.
okay, any other,
Okay, not meaning it to be a rebuttal, because it's nothing me against you, David, or anything. I'm saying, well, perhaps then maybe we need to go into a committee of the whole, and we should go through this exercise and make our cuts and find them.
I would much rather, Frank,
go ahead.
I'd much rather ask administration to do that. That's just my reaction.
Deacon Robert?
I find myself in a difficult spot here on the board, because I really applaud you, David, for your concern, and it's a legitimate concern for religious education. And I have to agree with Bernie and Dick as well. But I think this should be a legacy of this board, that we are strong supporters of Catholic education and in funding it accordingly. Would you consider amending your amendment to for the next budget, so that when this board is dissolved, that we will have this on the book, that this is what we want for the future of our division?
No, but hearing the comments, I suspect this amendment will fail. But then, Deacon Robert, I don't say that closes the door on other motions.
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to do that, but I also would welcome, as I think you appreciate, any other discussion we have about enhancing the resources we give to religious education.
Thank you, Chair. Your timing of the discussion is very good because CCSSA as a provincial body is spending a lot of time all dedicated to remediation and developing staff there. And so there will be a number of opportunities. However, I guess depending on how the vote goes, should it not pass here, if it's the board's will, I can promise that in the next round, we'll have those positions built into the budget, because that'll be something that we start working on in September and make decisions throughout the year so that we can accommodate that for the next budget.
This is just may I request a recorded vote, and I'll like to call the question.
Okay. All right. So we're going to vote on the amended motion right now. So all in favor?
Can you read the motion again, please?
Go ahead, Chelsea.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I sent it to Chelsea.
That the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education direct senior administration to find $125,000 to increase the religious education budget. This is to be done without increasing the projected budget deficit. Administration is further directed to recommend if the additional funds should be used to increase the chaplaincy for students and or to hire a person to help with the religious education preparation of staff.
Okay, so that's what we're voting on, that one. So all in favor? Mr. Leahy? All opposed? So that's defeated.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, David. So now we're going to vote, now I need somebody to move the main.
David's already made the motion.
Okay,
So I'd like to call that question too, please. So I'm
Okay.
asking you now to hold the vote on
yeah. Okay, so now we'll vote on the original motion. All in favor? All opposed? Mr. Kinch.
Sorry. I don't think I read in the face or anything.
No,
Okay, good discussion, guys. All right, 4.3, St. Joseph budget adjustment.
Thank you.
Mr. McPherson.
Thank you. So this item was tabled at the May 14th public board meeting after the vote on the 24-25 budget. The principal at Monsignor Coy is requesting the use of reserve funds for St. Joseph's Academy, St. Joseph's Education Center of $12,000 for the purchase of textbooks, novels, and other resources required to accommodate the larger number of students at the school who are working in St. Joseph's Education Center and need access to these resources. So the recommended decision is be it resolved that the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education approve the increase in the St. Joseph's Education Center by $12,000 from the St. Joseph's accumulated operating surplus.
Okay, that money is there though, right?
Correct.
Yeah. David,
I'd like to move the motion.
any discussion? All in favor?
Yeah, I'd like,
Oh, sorry.
I would ask either Dr. Zarichny or Mr. Gale through next year, perhaps at the quarterly report time, that we get updates as to how many students are being served. St. Joseph's Education Center, just so we know how much, I know the moral argument, even if there's 2 or 3, we should be serving them. But I'd just be curious to see what the number is.
And I would like to know the FTE of those students too. Are they full-time or are they one class or that kind of stuff, if that can be done?
Like how many, total number of courses are being, how many kids you have to keep, well, it's 1.0.
Because we need 13 for the grant, right? Okay, David has moved this. All in favor? All right, Notre Dame Academy budget adjustment, Mr. McPherson.
Thank you. This is the final budget adjustment related to the modernization of their fitness room. They're requesting the use of $35,000 from their accumulated operating reserve, and that's to cover the renovations to the fitness room by wall construction of $15,000 and $20,000 for flooring construction of some additional equipment. So the recommended decision is be it resolved that the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education approve the increase in the Notre Dame Academy budget by $35,000 from the Notre Dame Academy accumulated operating surplus.
Okay, would somebody like to make that motion? Stephen Robert, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Passed. All right, and that brings us to the end of this meeting. Mr. Mestel, can you lead us in prayer, please?
Okay. Join me please in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Carrying out your ministry, Lord, thank you for being with us during this meeting and for having guided our thoughts, words, and actions. Stay with us now as we leave this meeting and return to our respective lives. Help us to keep you as you are now in our thoughts, words, and actions. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Okay, I call this adjourned. And then we just have one little item left from the committee of the whole.
Yeah, so Chelsea has,
I have to stop the
oh,
and then.
Chelsea has left it.
We gotta come back here at 7.